I do have a recurring dream. It has to do with exploring this endless succession of rooms that are empty and going from one to the next. Then feeling hopelessly abandoned and lonely and unable to find anyone else. That's a pretty good description of death. I mean, death is supposed to be a finality, but it's actually a loss of everyone you care about. I do have fantasies sometimes about dying, about what people must feel like when they're dying, or what I would feel like if I were dying. And it's such a profoundly sad, lonely feeling that I really can't bear it. So I go back to thinking about how I'm not going to die.
Got a Secret, starring Steve Allen.
First of all, would you tell the folks your name?
My name is Ray Kurzweil, and I'm from Queens, New York.
Queens, New York. And before we show the audience what his secret is, we have just a few seconds for Raymond to play this piece of music. Raymond, the piano's all yours.
You?
Raymond's secret concerns something that he did, and we'll start the game this time with Bess Myers.
Raymond, that's a very unlikely sounding piece of music. Did you compose it?
No, I didn't.
$20 down, 60 to go. Henry?
Was that thing written by a computer?
Wow, yes.
Well, I built a computer, and by feeding in certain relationships and music, I was able to write music with it.
Raymond, how old are you?
I'm 17.
Your parents know what you've been up to?
My father is a musician, and he doesn't like the competition.
Raymond, I'm astounded at anyone who can do anything at all of this sort, and I predict a great future for you. We were very pleased to have you with us tonight. Congratulations.
Ray Kurzweil is here. He has been called the rightful heir to Thomas Edison. His new book is entitled The Singularity is Near, When Humans Transcend Biology.
I read your book, some of the most frightening and yet hopeful stuff I've ever read.
Ray Kurzweil is a pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence.
He's an award-winning scientist and engineer, a millionaire several times over because of his invention.
He's the holder of 24 patents.
Ray Kurzweil
Was chief inventor of the flatbed scanner.
A reading machine for the blind, Kurzweil keyboard synthesizer.
This guy is freaky. Bill Gates has called him the best in the world at predicting the future.
When Ray Kurzweil makes a prediction, lots of folks listen.
He predicted the collapse of the Soviet Union, described the rise of the internet, and foretold the year a computer would beat a chess champion.
According to Ray, you're going to have relationships with machines.
Computers will have consciousness in just 25 years.
Kurzweil sees a day when microscopic computers will make all kinds of learning as easy as downloading.
You're saying millions of tiny computers floating around in my head?
Fundamentally, you're talking about tampering with humankind.
Inventor Ray Kurzweil thinks that one day humans may be able to live forever.
We come back to this book, to the singularity is near. What does singularity mean?
When you say the singularity is coming, what does that mean exactly?
And that's what you mean by the term singularity?
What is singularity?
Singularity is a future period which technological change will be so rapid and its impact so profound that every aspect of human life will be irreversibly transformed.
There won't be a clear distinction between humans and machines.
Our computers are not going to be these rectangular devices we put in our pocket. They're going to be inside our bodies
and brains, and we're going to be a hybrid of biological and non-biological intelligence. If you go back 500 years, not much happened in a century. Now a lot happens in 6 months. Technology feeds on itself and it gets faster and faster. In about 40 years, the pace of change is going to be so astonishingly quick that you won't be able to follow it unless you enhance your own intelligence by merging with the intelligent technology we're creating. So that's such a profound transformation that we've borrowed this metaphor from physics and call that a singularity. People are sometimes afraid of the future, and if you talk about what life will be like 10, 20 years from now, it may sound frightening, and so people imagine destructive, dystopian scenarios, but in fact, technology has been the only thing that's enabled us to overcome problems. When I was 5, I decided I'd be an inventor. I had this idea that if you put things together in just the right way, you can create transcendent effects. Other kids were wondering what they were going to be, fireman, teacher, and I always had this conceit, well, I know what I'm going to be. I started my first company when I was 18 years old. Since then, I've started quite a few others, over a dozen, I'd say.
Well, in the old days, he'd come to me with some crazy idea, and I'd tell him, yeah, right. I don't have that reaction anymore because he's done so many things that I thought were impossible.
Most inventors fail not because they don't get their gadgets to work, but because their timing is wrong. People don't start a project when the hardware and the technological capability doesn't exist to support it. But in fact, you should do that. And realizing that, I became an ardent student of technology trends. And this really started about 30 years ago. And being an engineer, I gathered a lot of data. And I began to see that if it was an information technology, that it followed exquisitely predictable trajectories. And you can use this then as a planning tool. I can now take projections for not just 2, 3, 4, or 6 years, but 10 years from now, and 20 years from now, and invent with the technologies of 2020 or 2030. And I can't build those devices yet, but I can describe them and I can write about them, and that's been the source of the material for my books. I wrote a book, The Singularity is Near, which really tried to provide a scientific foundation for this concept, to really look at the different technologies that are feeding into the profound changes that we're seeing. I do have a certain perspective on the future. It does come from scientific investigation, but it does result in a different perspective of what's important today and what the future will be like. And I see the common wisdom being quite different than that. And I think it's actually important that people understand what's important. In fact, I have an opportunity to talk to an audience for an hour. I'll make a fair amount of progress in terms of convincing them that there's another way to view some of these issues.
He has a certain vision of what's going to be happening, and he would like the world to know about it, to prepare for it. He's got a mission of telling the world about what's going to come in terms of technology.
I'm really looking forward to this because the gaming industry really fits in well with what I like to talk about, which is the acceleration of progress. And I've been studying for 30 years the phenomenon of the exponential growth of information technology. This has taken on a life of its own. I have a group now of 10 people that helps me gather data in many different fields, and we make mathematical models of how technology evolves. When I came to MIT, I went there in 1965, and I went there because MIT was so advanced in 1965 that it actually had its own computer. Took up half a building, cost $11 million. It was shared by thousands of students and professors. You needed influence to get close to it. The computer in your cell phone today is 1 million times smaller, 1 million times cheaper, 1,000 times more powerful. That's a billion-fold increase in price performance that we've seen in computation in the last 40 years.
What Ray does consistently is take a whole bunch of steps everybody agrees on and take principles for extrapolating that everybody agrees on and show they lead to things that nobody agrees on. And you shoot the messenger because the extrapolation leads to things that just seem crazy.
He annoys people with the boldness of his projections of the future, which from my point of view seem to be based on data-driven, systematic extrapolations of, you know, look, this is what's been happening, why do you think it's going to stop? I guess I would say his principal tool is the exponential.
People routinely underestimate what's achievable in long periods of time, like 1 decade or 2 decades, because they leave out the radical implications of exponential growth. We can already sense how much more change occurs in a year than in the years before that. You speak to young people, teenagers, and even in their lifetimes, they can see how much more quickly technology moves today than it did 5 years ago. Acceleration of technology is the implication of what I call the law of accelerating returns. The nature of technological progress is exponential. If I count linearly, 30 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I get to 30. If I count exponentially, 2, 4, 8, 16, 30 steps later, I'm at 1 billion. It makes a dramatic difference. About 40 years ago, Gordon Moore saw that there was exponential growth in the power of semiconductors, of chips. Basically, every 2 years, we can put twice as many components on a chip. And because they're closer together, they run faster. And so computers get twice as capable overall for the same price every year. We'll make another billion-fold increase in price performance in the next 25 years, and again, shrink the size of these technologies 100,000-fold. So we went from a building to something that fits in your pocket in 40 years, and the next 25 years we'll go from something that fits in your pocket to something that's the size of a blood cell. The reason that information technology grows exponentially is that we use the latest technology to create the next. So each new generation of technology grows exponentially in capability, and the speed of that process accelerates over time. This is true in general of an evolutionary process. In fact, even biological evolution, long before even humans evolved, shows the same phenomenon. The very first paradigm of biological evolution was the evolution of DNA. That took 1 billion years, but then evolution adopted it and has used it ever since. So the next stage, the Cambrian explosion, when all the body plans of the animals evolved, went 100 times faster, only took 10 million years. After a few more steps, Homo sapiens, the first technology-creating species, evolved, not only took a few 100,000 years. Evolution then shifted from biological evolution to technological evolution. It took tens of thousands of years to evolve stone tools, fire, the wheel. And then we always use the latest technology to create the next technology. So the whole pace of technology has accelerated. Major paradigm shifts like search engines evolved in just 5 or 6 years. And the reason we get to a singularity, a point of astonishingly quick change, is because it's going to go into very fast gear over the next several decades.
For me, Ray's projections are obvious. I mean, we are a young star and a young planet and a very young species in this 15 billion-year-old galaxy. People think of the human race as being this technologically advanced species. For God's sakes, we've been technologically advanced for a whole 100 years. We've been the human race for 100,000 years. We are just at the very beginning. We have so much to go. We have so much to learn. We know nothing.
Right after college, we had a
meeting. We kind of got together at a pancake house in Cambridge. And he kind of laid out his goals at that point. And those goals were to invent things so that the blind could see and the deaf could hear and the lame could walk.
The reading problems of the blind may soon be significantly reduced.
To the blind student, there are never enough textbooks and research papers in Braille or recorded material.
Today, Mike Taibbi visited a Cambridge research lab where they've invented a machine that can make any book talk.
470 years ago,
the user can take an active role in his reading. He can back up, hear a line over again. He can go word by word. He can have words spelled out.
It actually started in '75 when there was this thing on the news about this man who had come up with a way that would enable a blind person to be able to read. And I said, this is crazy, this is impossible, I got to meet this person. Obviously, it was a life changer. I mean, for me, it was really, really kind of big, you know, but however big it was, it didn't matter because, listen, for the first time, a blind person would be able to read his or her private information. It was an amazing experience.
The current cost of $10,000 to $20,000 makes the machine practical only for libraries, institutions, or rehabilitation centers.
The reader was very expensive back then. It had to be because the development effort was very expensive. So roughly 10 years ago, the Kurzweil reading technology began to become very prominent as an individual consumer device.
It's very small.
So this device actually, it's kind of bulky in your pocket, but this was our first model of a portable reading machine for the blind, and a blind person just snaps a picture and it reads it out loud. So cell phones are becoming more powerful, and we expect very soon that there will be a cell phone powerful enough to actually do this whole technology in a cell phone.
I think we may see a time when having sight or not having sight doesn't really matter. You know, Ray has taught us that we'll communicate by sending thoughts to one another over the internet, that computers will be embedded in our bloodstream. Everything Ray has predicted has come true, and I have no doubt that this will too.
Oh.
Hello, how are you?
Great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, really
Big,
a pleasure.
smart guy, and you got lost getting to Alexandria. You've made such remarkable contributions in so many different fields. I downloaded your Wikipedia the other night, and it took me half the evening to get through it.
I was just actually on a blue ribbon panel called Grand Challenges in Engineering, and Larry Page and I wrote the energy plan, basically within 20 years to move to solar energy. All of us are convinced that within 5 years we will reach a tipping point where the cost per watt from solar energy is less than the cost per watt from coal and oil. We only have to capture 1 part in 10,000 of the sunlight that falls in the Earth to meet all of our energy needs. So within 20 years, we could actually completely replace fossil fuels with nano-engineered solar panels.
Our energy needs are rising rapidly as all of these developing nations.
There's a lot of encouraging technologies. I mean, it's not the case we're going to go the next 100 years with just increasing use of fossil fuels. If you ask what's the most important, most powerful phenomena in the universe, it's intelligence. All the problems that we struggle with today, people worry about the environment and energy and health and disease and poverty. We'll be able to solve those problems, in fact, well before the singularity, just through the increasing power of information technology. The cause of 80% of the disease in the world comes from polluted water. There are very inexpensive technologies emerging. I know the inventor of one such technology, Dean Kamen. Small device that can take very polluted water and create very clean water very inexpensively. For $3 billion, with this technology, we could meet all of the water needs of Africa. I didn't start with this concept that the future is going to be this remarkable change and work backwards to try to justify that. When I looked at the implication of what technology will be like and how it's going to transform our human experience in the world we live in, if you go out 20, 30, 40 years, I began to realize what a significant change lay ahead of us. The three great overlapping revolutions sometimes goes by the letter G and R. And G stands for genetics. Really, another word for it is biotechnology, is mastering the information processes in our biology. And we ultimately will actually be able to reprogram biology away from disease and from aging. N stands for nanotechnology. In the next 25 years, we will have blood cell-sized devices that go inside your body and keep you healthy from inside. That go in your brain and interact with your biological neurons and allow us to merge with non-biological intelligence. The third one goes by the letter R, which stands for robotics, robots. Really, though, refers to artificial intelligence. And that's the most significant revolution of all. In about 20 years, I've set the date 2029, a machine, an AI, will be able to match human intelligence and go beyond it. So artificial intelligence, which will give us not just more human intelligence, but will actually give us superhuman intelligence, will enable us to solve problems that we're not able to solve today. We're looking forward to a time where we can back up our brains. Our brains will be largely non-biological, so we will be basically machines. We can stop aging. We can live indefinitely. All of our biological bodies are limited, and we need to deal with overcoming their limitations with one means or another. There's nothing good about disease and death as much as we try to ennoble it. People have had no alternative but to rationalize, oh, that tragic thing, that's really a good thing. But death is a profound tragedy. It's a profound loss of relationships and knowledge and skill and meaning. Some people articulate, well, we need to accept death. That's the goal of life, is to get comfortable with death and accept it. I don't accept it. A lot of things have changed in just a few years' time. So we are expanding at an accelerating pace our own frontiers and our own capability. And fundamentally, we need to get smarter by amplifying our intelligence with this mental amplifier, which is our technology, in order to continue this grand quest to expand human knowledge.
Someone who disagrees with you is on the line from Knoxville, Tennessee.
Hello. I'm a materials scientist. I work at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I'm a big fan of Book TV, and the reason I'm calling today is to express my disappointment that you have invited this highly sophisticated crackpot and given him a national forum to express his pseudo-religious predictions that have no basis in objective reality.
It's taken me a while to get my mental and emotional arms around the dramatic implications of what I see for the future. So when people have never heard of ideas along these lines and they hear about it for the first time and they have some superficial reaction, I really see myself, some decades ago and realize it's a long path to actually get comfortable with where the future is headed.
The singularity is the point at which machine intelligence begins to amend itself, improve itself.
Machine intelligence improves until we get to a point where, well, it assumes control.
I think the biggest implications of the singularity are that we don't know the implications of the singularity.
The word singularity is a mathematical word. Singularity is sort of where the model breaks down.
As in the center of a black hole, there's said to be a singularity in physics. It's a tear in the fabric of space-time. Things just change suddenly. There's no more smooth transition.
It's going to be interesting to see if we can get through the next 10 or 20 years.
When and if we reach a place where machines are more capable of doing things that we call thinking, the consequences of that as to who's running the world and which way will it be taken and how will we relate to it, is hard to really understand.
Eventually, we're going to transcend humanity. Eventually, we're going to go beyond the whole way of thinking, feeling, existing, and relating that constitutes humanity.
The singularity is of mythic proportions. It's an idea so large that we have to deal with it, even if it turns out not to be true. The singularity, like maybe some other mythic events, has many definitions. One of those definitions is the arrival of a super intelligence that will very quickly invent solutions to the major problems that we have. And so that very rapidly we will have things like immortality, if not kind of almost superpowers. I think there's lots of things that Ray is correct about, that he's completely off on the timing. There's definitely a lot in this vision of the future that's hardwired into people's own hope to see this before they die. So we have a lot of people imagining that the future is going to happen in 2040 or something, just before they're dead. So they get to see that. Immortality, yes, someday, but not by 2040.
Stuff is scattered around. This is a Kurzweil grand. It's actually a Kurzweil piano built into a grand case. My father had this bust of Beethoven. It's actually Beethoven's death mask. It looks like my father. People thought it was a bust of him. These are bound books of business deals, private placements, sales of companies. This is a table of awards. Got about over 300 cat figurines.
Well, here's to living forever.
Well,
That's not just a salutation in our family. Yeah, here's our impatience garden. It's a little after the peak.
I'm the assistant gardener.
She does what I told you to.
My father really loved gardening. He loved getting into the dirt, and he created beautiful things. We had the only fig trees in Queens that blossomed. That's not something I inherited from him. My parents were involved with the arts, and my mother was a very talented artist. My father was a brilliant musician. You know, generally the conversations around the dinner table had to do with excitement about some new idea that had been discovered, either scientific or some social insight. And there was a great respect for human knowledge. That was actually part of the religion, if you will, of my family, of the power of human ideas and the power of ideas to shape human history and overcome problems. It was actually personalized, where, you know, you, Ray, could find ideas to overcome challenges. My father was somewhat of a tragic figure in that his genius really was thwarted. He was able to create magical effects with his music. It was a work of passion, but there were many real-life challenges. He struggled with his health, he struggled with financial problems of being a musician and trying to support a family, and also supporting his son's technology ventures. And if I had ideas, even if they were crazy, they supported them.
Fred was very sick with a heart condition, and he had one heart failure after another, very often brought on by him, I'm afraid to say. Fred would work from early in the morning till never come home before 9, 10 o'clock at night. And I think it was hard on Raymond. You know, he needed a father, and his father was never around.
He had a heart attack when he was 51, and then he had heart failures. He was getting weaker. He really worked hard to try to overcome these challenges, but we didn't have the knowledge back then. It just didn't exist. The problem with my father actually was a cloud in my life. I was aware that heart disease was hereditary. We are fundamentally information. At the core of every one of our 10 trillion cells are genes, and genes are sequences of data. And they evolved thousands of years ago. Many of them go back millions of years. We have this old software that really is not entirely relevant to the modern age we live in. And we're now understanding the implications of those programs, and we're learning how to change them to overcome the problems that we encounter.
How often do you get that done?
I usually test my blood every few months, 3 months maybe. Actually had a pain right in my gut one day and went to the hospital, and it turned out to be pancreatitis. My triglycerides were very high. Along the way, I was then diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I was 35 years old.
They painted a very bleak prognosis. It was gloom and doom, and it freaked me out, I have to say.
I started out on the conventional course. I was given insulin. That actually made things worse. So I had all the markers of a disposition to heart disease.
We have to get really on this. This can be really bad.
So then I began to really dive into this with my own approach. I could use the sort of discipline of gathering knowledge and harnessing science and leveraging it to overcome these problems.
He's a great genius, but he also has another talent, his ability to swallow pills. He's just unfazed by it, you know, what most people just find so yucky. He's okay with it, you know.
So you're looking good.
Yeah, but you're looking better.
I work hard at that. But,
and what are you doing?
Well, mostly I'm reprogramming my biochemistry with lots of supplements. I take about 200 pills a day, actually.